All right, hello everybody. Welcome to What to Read. How's everybody doing? Jason, how you doing? Excellent. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the vice presidential nominee, Senator Kamala Harris. She went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and she did her first, I think this is her first solo trip as the vice presidential nominee to Joe Biden, who's actually doing quite well in the polls, as well as just anecdotally. I think people feel good about his campaign. He's done quite well in terms of his public appearances. He seems stable and steady, which at this point is winning. Like, that's all you got to do is just seem normal. And she shows up in Milwaukee. She gets off the campaign plane. And the star of the event was, in addition to the senator, was her Chuck Taylors. She wore those Chuck Taylor sneakers, which of course trended, showing that she's not only bringing life to the campaign. There's a lot of excitement, especially in places like Florida and in other black communities about her. The Caribbean community in Florida is very excited about her. I'm hearing a lot of good news for that. But she's just kind of, she's bringing a little style. She didn't show up in a Melania Trump high heel look like she did when, I think this was when Melania went to Houston, when they went to go visit the children. I think that's the one where she wore the I Really Don't Care, Do You jacket and heels. Like, she always wore heels whenever she goes on these events. I'm always interested watching shows where everyone wears heels. And it's weird that women just walk around in heels all the time and they never actually wear flat shoes. But big ups to Kamala Harris on wearing some flats, a nice like black suit and flats. And not just flats, but Chuck Taylors. And Chuck Taylor trended. Chuck Taylor's trended. It's good for her. We love a good, comfortable footwear. Also, what else is going on here? Lots more women in politics in the news. Let's talk about the Kentucky Senate race. Not really looking good for Amy McGrath right now. She is down 17 points in Kentucky, 53-36 versus Mitch McConnell. Jason, we were talking this morning, we were on our walkies, that, my guess was that Charles Booker would probably be doing better because he was more attuned to Black Lives Matter. I think he more had a movement behind him. The strategy that Ms. McGrath is using, and she is a former Marine Corps pilot, so good for her for serving. That's something I don't think Mitch McConnell's ever done. But she's sort of running as kind of a Republican. I would love to have her on the Readout to talk about it. We've tried to get an interview with her. That hasn't really worked out so far. But she's sort of running as sort of a Republican-ish Democrat, like sort of conservative. It's not really working right now. It's not really working right now. We're going to see how that goes. But yeah, so she's one of the women who's running for Senate. It's not 100% really popping at the moment. Jamie Harrison in South Carolina actually doing a lot better in South Carolina. He's actually polling at or near Lindsey Graham and looking like he's in a much stronger position. I actually think that the whole sort of ball game is going to be in the South this time. It's places like South Carolina. It's places like Georgia, where you still have a lot of problems with disenfranchisement. We've got new reports about just how bad it is. Hundreds of thousands of people being taken off the rolls in Georgia. Still not looking great. But I still think the South is where the action is. And hopefully Democrats will get their act together and get down there. I don't know if they can help Amy McGrath, though. I don't know if Amy McGrath, if it's possible to really help her. Because she's kind of pulling she's actually doing worse than Allison Lundgren Grimes did. And Allison Lundgren Grimes tried to unseat Mitch McConnell in 2014 and also ran she wouldn't admit that she'd voted for Hillary Clinton. She was sort of kind of she wouldn't admit that she voted for Barack Obama, I should say. She sort of called herself a Clinton Democrat and kind of skated away from Barack Obama and kind of wouldn't admit that she voted for him. And it was kind of, I don't know if that's the smart way to do it. I think the South, it's possible to win, but you got to do something other than be kind of a Republican. And I don't think that's working. So let's see if these other, sort of Southern races can sort of follow a little bit more the model of the Californian that's on the ticket with Joe Biden and be a little bolder. I think you could be just a tiny bit bolder. I think that would help. Do you agree, Jason? I agree. Yeah, so we'll see if that changes. We'll see what happens with that. What other exciting things are happening out there in the world? Over the last weekend that we're doing this this podcast, things have gotten, even weirder in terms of the Trump campaign's attempt to scare white women voters away from Joe Biden, which I think is hilarious because Joe Biden is like the least scary candidate I can think of. If you're a moderate Democrat, he's like kind of your bag. I really don't know why they're trying to turn him into like a Marxist, terrorist leader, which isn't going to work because he's Joe Biden. I mean, he's so Joe Biden-y that I don't really think it's working. And I think Kamala Harris is helping him out in terms of helping to like sort of increase his image as just a normal guy with like a really cool friend. And I think that's going to help him. We've got a really great guest today who is also a fabulous woman, not in politics, actually. We're going to veer away from the political stuff for a moment, and we're going to talk a little empowerment. A woman who is a woman of color who is phenomenal and has an amazing career actually in hip hop. And that's where most people know her from. Let's bring her in. And joining me now is the baddest bitch in the room. And I can say that because it says it on the cover of her memoir, Sophia Chang. I'm so excited for this conversation. We ran into each other at several events, and in one in which you actually gave me a T-shirt for me to also be the baddest bitch in the room. Of course, I laundered it, so it's in the laundry, so I couldn't wear it today. So I know you got yours on.
I do,
yes. So tell me about this. First of all, talk a little bit about, for those who do not know you, cultural queen, tell us about you. What are you all about? What is your aesthetic? What are you doing?
Ooh, I'm doing so much. I'll give you a little bit of context first. I was a French lit major, child of Korean immigrants, proud child of Korean immigrants. Moved here in '87, worked at Paul Simon, worked at labels. I was the first Asian woman in hip hop. I always say that I was raised by Wu Tang. I managed ODB, God rest his soul, RZA and GZA, the three members of Wu Tang Clan. And then in '95, because of Wu Tang's influence, I started training in Shaolin Kung Fu. I ended up business partnering, and also romantic partnering with my Kung Fu master, who's a 34th generation Shaolin monk. We had 2 kids. So I took a hard ride out of the music business, and then came back in really through television and film. And I managed, in addition to the guys from Wu Tang, Q-Tip, A Tribe Called Quest, Raphael Saadiq, and D'Angelo. And then I decided, Joy, in 2014 to write the book. And now I consider myself a storyteller. But if you ask what is the engine that drives Sophia Chang, I would say at the foundation, it's to be in service of others. And if you asked me in service of whom, it really is of everybody, but most specifically to women of color. And that's what gets me up every day. I worked with Paul Simon in 1987. I am very clear on what fame is. I never wanted to be famous. So I didn't do any of this for self-enrichment, self-congratulations, self-aggrandizement. I don't need any of that. I did it really because I understood that I could be in service of others. So that's what propels me every day.
Your opening chapter in this book is, where are you from? And I know, and I laugh because I have a member of my team who was on the AM Joy team and is now, thankfully, yay, on the Reid Out team, who gets this all the time, right? Where are you from? And she's from like California, but her parents are also Korean American, and people will think, are you from China? Are you from, you know what I mean? Like, she gets this all the time, and it drives her really up the wall. Was that where you were going when you put this in there? Because this is one of her pet peeves.
No question. I would say that this is a very common experience for people of color in general. It's a loaded question, right, Joy? So if you ask a white person where they're from, they'll say Des Moines.
Yes.
Los Angeles.
Right. Because
the assumption is that I'm asking for your geography within this country. Yeah. And then you might be surprised and they'll say Paris, right?
Right.
But when it is asked of us, there is an underlying derision and dismissiveness, right? Because when certain people in certain contexts ask, where are you from? It's not a question. It's a statement, right? It's essentially saying, you don't belong here.
Yeah. And when
that's
people
ask, statement that I was trying to make, having been, from when I was a child, having been asked that question, that goes hand in hand with the other microaggressions, like your English is so good, and you
speak so well. Yeah. Isn't that always a great one? Like, well, what do you expect? Yeah, yeah. And talk about some of the challenges, because as you said, for women of color in media, it's difficult. I mean, you working in the hip hop space, that is a very macho space. It's a space where there are lots of people of color, at least at the performing end, but not maybe necessarily at the sort of, executive end. Talk a little bit about that and how you moved in those spaces and how complicated that was.
It was complicated. So I also had an insecurity because it's 1987. I moved to New York. I am a Korean Canadian woman who is a French lit major. I am embraced by a world and a community and into a culture that is not mine. It is not of my making, so I was a guest, and it was such a privilege to be invited into this world. In terms of so there are two things, right? One was being Asian, which I am an outsider. I'm a minority within a minority within a minority, right? And I am also a woman. I think that part of how I navigated that, Joy, and I think all women of color understand this, I think we walk a tightrope every day. We're constantly juggling how we're being perceived, how we wish to be perceived, right? Will those two things intersect? And as a woman, how am I accepted? How am I taken in? I am very, very clear on that. And so I am, I have the genetic privilege of high cheekbones and a hummingbird metabolism, and I am a relatively attractive woman. Yes, hip hop is macho, goes from macho all the way through rampant misogyny. I think that I knew very, very early that I would have to be almost nun-like, which is unfair, right? Because the guys were allowed to do whatever they wanted. They could sleep with whomever they wanted. But the second that any of us women did it, we get tagged with the scarlet letter. Right? H for hoe. And it doesn't mean that I didn't have desires and that I didn't have opportunities, but I told myself that I couldn't do those things, unfair as it was, because I knew that that would follow me. So that's one thing. I've also never been drunk and I've never been high, and I'm always the sober judge in the room. And I think because music is a lifestyle, it's around nightlife, that there's a lot of substances and people aren't always on their P's and Q's, but I am the one that always dots my I's and crosses my T's. So people are kind of like, oh, thank God.
And by the way,
Sophie's here. It's all going to be, it's all going to be good.
And those who don't know Sophia and have never been out with Sophia, by the way, she just said she's never been drunk and never been high, but she's the life of every party. Let me just let you know that she may not be explaining fully the experience of being out with Sophia, but I've been out while she's out with us, and trust and believe she's having fun at all times.
Yes, because I don't care. But being a woman in that space was complicated. But I also think, Joy, in retrospect, I think being an Asian woman in hip hop was very different than being a Black woman in hip hop, very different than being a brown woman in hip hop, and different than being a white woman in hip hop. I would say that at that time, in the late 80s and early 90s, in terms of identity, I thought much more about my race than I did about issues of gender, because I grew up being called a chink, a Jap, and a gook, and that stuff was so overt. Even in New York, I was getting that stuff. Like you're saying, your English is so good and you speak so well. And I don't think I was as finely attuned to the issues of gender. But yeah, I mean, it's, there are certain things that I was also insulated from, right? So the strongest bond that I have and with which people will associate me is with Wu Tang. And there were certain things that I just didn't see. People were like, oh my God, you must have seen crazy stuff with groupies and blah, blah, blah. I was like, I didn't. They didn't want me to see that. Right. Nobody's saying that it didn't happen, but because I'm not a man and because they knew that I wouldn't want to see it, I didn't see much of it. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that that men didn't find me attractive, but I will say that I worked very hard, Joy, such that the primary thought in their heads around Sophia Chang was not, she's really sexy, but wow, is she smart. And she is so competent and good at her job.
And you know, and because there's a memoir, we learned so much about you in this book. And you have a chapter that I think every woman who has ever had a baby or maybe even babysat one will relate to. Everything you need to know is never enough. Yeah. Talk about working childhood into all of this fabulous and complicated mix of what you were and have been doing.
Well, you know, by the time, so I met the father of my children in 95. I was managing Old Dirty Bastard, rest his soul, at that time. And then I transitioned out pretty quickly. So at the time that I had both my children, I was full-time managing the USA Shaolin Temple, which is where my ex taught and still teaches. So it wasn't that hard, Joy, to integrate the kids into it because my husband, quote unquote, we weren't formally married, but my partner was also my business partner, so I could bring the kids to the temple. You know, it wasn't a 9 to 5. When it got more complicated was I took a job as an assistant, superbly overqualified. As an assistant when my daughter was very young, it wasn't even so much for the money as it was, I need to get away from my job. I need some autonomy. And then, yes, it becomes more complicated. I was in fashion, and fashion is populated largely by where I was by young women. And out of probably 25, 30 people that I worked with, I think I was the only mother, Joy. And it meant that they didn't really have the same they didn't have empathy because they didn't have the experience. So if I couldn't go to a party or I couldn't just drop something, you know what it's like. Yeah. I've got to get a sitter. That doesn't happen at the push of a button, right? Yep. And so it was that definitely made it complicated. I will say that during COVID, I look at my friends who have smaller children and I think,
oh my God.
Joy.
You and me both, sister. My children are grown. I'm so thankful.
I mean, can you imagine, Joy?
Nope.
If I work at home, but if I had to work at home with 2 little kids running around, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I need to take a nap, I want a snack, I gotta pee, you gotta wipe my butt, you gotta get me on Zoom, you gotta set it up. I mean, I would have lost my mind. And I am so grateful that, like you, that my kids are grown and yeah, you can do what it is that you're going to do. You know, both my kids are in college now and they're so independent. I think it would be very, very, very difficult to be around them. And also, I like my kids better now that they're older. They're just far more interesting.
You know what's so funny? And so we our kids are around the same age because we have one more that's in college and 2 graduated. Yeah. But it's funny, back in the day, because we were, running around in the day too, back in those times. And all of the people who didn't have kids were looking at us, me and Sophia, like, boy, they're crazy. They have these little kids now. Who's laughing now? They waited and we had our kids. And now they all have little kids. We have a lot of friends that have little kids right now. And I cannot understand how they're surviving.
Joy. Oh my God. Wait, it's like this. Wait, Sophia, I gotta go. I gotta get him on a Zoom. Oh my God. And then you just remember, I remember, Joy, remember that there was a show called Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
Yes. I
realized helping my son with his 4th grade homework, not being able to do it. And I went, I'm not smarter than a
No, remember the new math? All of a sudden the math changed. And then it's like, Mom, it's the new math. Like, what do you mean the new math? And I'm trying to show, I remember trying to show our kids how to do, like a fraction or something, the way I knew how to do it. And they're like, that's not how my teacher does it. And this was like in the 90s. Can you imagine now?
No.
Or the 2000s.
And then we had to learn to do math like they did math. And I'm already crappy at math.
And it's I'm an artistic person, so I don't really know the answer to this.
My thing that I used to say to my kids, which they still laugh about to this day, was I would say, Look it up on the internet.
Look it up. Now we can just say, did you check Wikipedia before you asked me?
Exactly. Wiki, Google, all that.
Can you check that before we have to discuss it? I'm amazed. Well, your story, I mean, first of all, I'm flipping at the moment as I'm talking with you through the pictures, which I love it when an author gifts us with pictures. First of all, I love an old-timey picture. These are beautiful pictures of your parents, of your family, but also, you know, obviously pictures of your family, but also of folks that you knew in the industry. Tell me, you know, of all these people, you know, I'm a huge Tribe Called Quest fan, so I saw Q-Tip and I had to stop, and I've turned back over this page multiple times. But, you know, Andre 3000 are in here, obviously, Redman. You just go on and on and on. There's so many great artists who are listed here. Who, out of all of these folks that you worked with, there's Method Man, Raekwon, You God, all these, Raekwon the Chef, Ghostface Killah, ODB, the late ODB, God bless him, rest his soul. Who's your favorite of these artists? Who was the most interesting?
That is an impossible question to ask, not because I want to be politic about it, but because I simply don't have an answer. So I can tell you why they are my favorite for different reasons. Okay. Method Man, because he is the most emotionally expressive of all of them, the most affectionate and protective. You know, I talk about the fact that he's the first person to ever say to me, Sophie, you're family. Now, we didn't talk like that when I was growing up. The first time I heard it was literally when he uttered those words. And I'm telling you, it blew my mind, touched my heart, and shook my soul. And then I realized, I don't really know what that means. And then I realized, oh, I know what that means. Ghost is one of my favorites because he is also extremely protective and so sensitive. I mean, he has this song called All That I Got Is You with Mary J. Blige, and it's so beautiful. It's about his mother. And he is so the man that wrote and performed that song. So he has a real sensitivity. RZA, I would say that our connection is really cerebral. He and I can talk about movies and books and storytelling in a way that I think is very unique to him. GZA was frankly my favorite client, which I will say because he's the most humble of all of my clients, and frankly, one of the most humble people I've ever met. Look, Joy, if I was the genius from Wu Tang Clan, I would be out there. I would be so. I mean, I'm borderline insufferable now. If I had his talent, I would be untenable. I couldn't stand myself. But his humility, I mean, he would. And if anybody has ever managed an artist, they will understand how extraordinary this is. He would say, "Do I owe you any money?" He would always pay me so quickly. He would use the first person plural for stuff that he was doing. So our album, we did it, our project, our tour. And that kind of inclusion and the notion that he saw me as his partner and not his caretaker, right, was very different. Old Dirty Bastard. Dirty was my favorite because he had a persona, Joy, right, that everybody knows, that was crazy and unpredictable, and just could be all over the place and kind of wild. But then he had the side of him, you know, his 5% name is Ason Unique, like a unique son. And when he was Ason, I never, ever, ever called him Dirty. I always called him A, which is short for Ason Unique. I would just call him A, literally a letter, first letter of the alphabet. And when behind closed doors, he just became the funniest, most sensitive, kind, warm, generous, sweet man. And I loved that he gave me that version of him, which I would say that I probably have with all of my artists. And I have I think I have truly a unique gift with creatives. Q-Tip is my favorite because we laugh all the time. Like, I think we watch Midnight Run probably 20 times together. Like I saw him last year, and he was like, "These things go." He's quoting Chuck Roden in the movie. "These things go down. These things go down." Like we could quote the movie to each other, and we watched like whatchamacallit, Bugs Bunny cartoons, and I would always make him laugh. There in the Charlie Brown Christmas special, there's this fantastic scene where Schroeder's playing the piano, and all the kids are dancing on stage, and they have the cute dance moves, and I would do that and make them laugh. So they're all my favorites. And D'Angelo, who is not pictured in there, D is my favorite because he is as emotionally expressive as Method Man, and his language of love, like our love, platonic love as friends, is so profound, which shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, right, Joy?
Yeah.
And also, I feel like he props me up to me in ways that none of my other artists do. You know, he will make observations and he'll say something like, you know, Soph, you're a connoisseur, or he will say you can talk to artists in a way that nobody else can. And all of those things, especially coming from a mammoth talent like him, are very validating and reaffirming.
So also, I will just add that D'Angelo created a song called Untitled, How Does It Feel, which is actually the greatest music video of all time ever made by anybody ever. Were you on that set for that video?
No, I was very pregnant for that video. I was not paying attention at all, but I'm telling you, my friends called me. They were like, I know you're married. I know you're pregnant with your first child. You just have to watch this video. And I'm telling you, Joy, yes, I was deeply in love and in a committed relationship, but you don't even have to be interested in men. And that video is it's definitely one of those like,
yeah. I think I got pregnant watching that video just from watching it. I think I became pregnant when it started playing. I was like, wait a minute.
If there was a plan B, we would have watched the video and been like, gotta go to the pharmacy and get a plan B right now.
Jason's looking at me crazy because, you know, Jason is the producer of What to Read, but he's also my husband. But he's looking at me like, okay, he's laughing though, because it's real. I mean, I think I was actually pregnant from that video. I'm just saying. I think it happened. Just watching it. Hey, D'Angelo. You called this book The Baddest Bitch in the Room. And first of all, just your story and what you've been able to experience and the things that you've been able to do in your career, that would make anybody the baddest bitch in the room. But why did you call the book this? Why did you title it that?
So originally, Joy, when I first started thinking about writing a book, which was easily a decade ago, I was going to call the book Raised by Wu Tang, because I used to say, my name is Sophia Chang. And I was raised by Wu Tang because hip hop, and specifically Wu Tang, was so integral to my identity as an adult, right? They helped me find my voice and express and honor my anger. And then as I started writing, and I'm sure you know this, the book itself shifted. It was originally supposed to be a lean-in for women of color, and then it turned into what you have in your hands, which is essentially a traditional chronological memoir, autobiography, right? And I called it The Baddest Bitch in the Room because of what you said. When I had done this interrogation and kind of looked at my whole life, I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to call it The Baddest Bitch in the Room. But The Baddest Bitch in the Room is a term that I came up with in 2008. It was the second annual Black Girls Rock Gala. Black Girls Rock, founded by the inimitably wonderful Beverly Bond, model turned DJ turned philanthropist, who has this exceptional organization. And I was at the gala with Beth Ann Hardison, fashion activist and model manager, who was being honored, and with Sam Martin, a girlfriend of mine, also a Black woman, who was a stellar executive, film executive at HBO, and Joan Morgan, the author who wrote When Chicken Heads Come Home to Roost and the matriarch architect, in my eyes, of modern Black feminism. So we were all there, and so we were dressed up, and as we were leaving, I ran down the stairs and had them to take a picture, because I'm a total shutterbug. And I looked at them and I went, there is no doubt in my mind that my girls are the baddest bitches in the room. Now, remember that we are all of color. That at that point, we are all over 40. And now many of us are over 50. And while some people might think that's kind of crappy and, that's competitive, it's really not about being competitive. It is about being, again, majority of us are women of color who are older, who, with each of these things that we put on us, right? With sexism, with racism, and with ageism, all of these things that consistently erase us from the narrative, for us to claim that we are the baddest bitch in the room. Look, I am 55. I am Korean Canadian. I have this insane hairdo, which is hardly what you think of as beautiful, right? And I am telling the world loudly, fearlessly, subversively, without compunction or hesitation, that I'm the baddest bitch in the room. And I think it's revolutionary. I think that I spend my days destroying stereotypes and raging against the machine. I do it for me, but really I do it for everybody else that might not want to, be able to, and are constrained by those things. So I would love, it really is for anybody, but especially for women, I just don't think that we're taught to claim our greatness or to mine our power or to see our own beauty. I think that those things, if they are granted to us at all, Joy, are mapped onto us, right? You are beautiful because you are thin. You are beautiful because you are blonde. You are alluring because you are young, right? You are fashionable and my clothes look good on you because you are tall. All of these things are kind of, okay. Whereas I would love it if women could get to the place where they look inside at all the things that make them singularly beautiful. And it's the aggregate of those qualities that you bring together. And you look at this list and you go, wow, I kind of am the baddest bitch in the room. And I think that so rarely do we ever put ourselves through that exercise, and we're certainly never asked. So my hope is that every woman sees themselves as the baddest bitch in the room. Look, I'm a language major. I understand that it is a superlative. Therefore, technically, there is only one, but that is not the meaning.
Amen, amen, amen. Sophia Chang, you are phenomenal. Your career has been phenomenal. You are phenomenal. And The Baddest Bitch in the Room is a memoir that everyone should read, whether you are into hip hop or just into great storytelling and empowerment, particularly for women of color. This is a badass book, Miss Sophia. So thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. And the chapter that's not in the book that will be in my next one is about Unlock Her Potential, which is my program for mentorship for women of color 18 years and older in the U.S. We just went live yesterday, Joy.
Yes.
Yesterday, the program goes live. Today, my book comes out. It's a whirlwind.
Well, I'm going to have you come back. We have to talk more about that.
I would love to.
Absolutely.
Anytime.
And I will see you on the Instagrams or
I hope so.
social media. You're great.
I love you, and congratulations again, Joy. Your voice and your perspective and just your probity and how astute you are and your clarity, all of that is so welcomed and so needed in this landscape. I'm deeply grateful.
Thank you. I love you, girl. Thank you so much.
Take care.
All right, that is what to read. The book is The Baddest Bitch in the Room, Sophia Chang, an exciting memoir. Cool life. Like she lived a cool life. She was doing that around when we were doing Dubplate, Jason. She was doing this stuff with hip hop like around the time we were doing Video Dubplate. Very, very, very cool lady. So congratulations to her. And she's got a lot more to come. And so if you want to make sure that you don't miss any future episodes of What to Read, here's what you can do. You can subscribe. You can tell a friend to subscribe. You can subscribe whether it's on the podcast platform of your choice or on YouTube. You can hit the notification button to make sure that you never miss another episode because we've got so much great stuff coming up. We're coming close to the end of season 1, so there's going to be a lot more in season 2.
Don't forget, family, to smash that like button. It helps us with the YouTube algorithm, so hit that like button.
Yeah, hit the like button because you like us, right? I mean, come on, what's not to like? All right, we'll see you guys on the next, or hear you on the next. Either way, we'll be on the next What to Read. Goodbye.